this episode of the Naturist Living Show, Mormons in Naturism.
This episode of the Naturist Living Show is brought to you by Bare Oaks Family Naturist Park. At Bare Oaks, we offer traditional naturist values in a modern setting. Free your body, free your mind. www.bareoaks.ca.
Welcome, dear listener, to this episode 108 of the Naturist Living Show. My name is Stacee. I'm your host for this podcast and the owner of Bare Oaks Family Naturist Park. And about 5 months ago, I was on Reddit. Actually, I wasn't on Reddit. I am on Reddit regularly, but that's not how I found out. There was a post by MN Shyman that asked if there were any Mormon nudists out there. And there were many responses, lots of very helpful people. It's a very active group, the r/nudism, which we did a previous episode about, if you want to learn more about Reddit and that particular subreddit. EJP1082 was one of the response, and he said that there was a Naturist Living Show episode on Mormon Naturism, and he posted a link to it, he or she. And that was episode 51, all the way back in 2013. But that was a rebroadcast, with permission, of the Mormon Expression podcast. To that, though, Dmitry Bjorkovich, my apologies if I mispronounced your name, responded, and he said, "Honestly, that episode left a lot to be desired. Apart from the nervous snickering throughout the interview, I was disappointed that the only two people they could find to interview just happened to be former members of the church. And if memory serves, one of them didn't even agree that you could be an active member and a nudist. I would have found it more helpful if they had at least one active member to balance the perspective. Given that this was only a rebroadcast from a different podcast, maybe Stefan could do a follow-up episode where he does the interview himself with an active church member. I'm sure there are a few at Bare Oaks." And he tagged me on it, which is how I found out about it. As I said, I'm not always there. It's hard to keep up with everything on the internet. So I replied and said if there's any Mormons who want to volunteer to send me an email, and several did. The original podcast is still an interesting one to listen to. What I like about podcasts done by non-naturists is they're all sort of new about it or not as expert about it, and their discussion, yeah, it's true, they're snickering, but it's interesting to hear a bunch of people who are not expert naturists often talk about the movement. It gives you a different insight of how we're viewed by the outside world, or what it's like for first-timers and people who don't have the experience. I did the same thing with some of the other podcasts, like the comedians. And as I said, several people contacted me, and we did manage to coordinate a Skype interview with two of them.
So my name is Mike. I'm 42. Lived in Utah pretty much all my life. Went to college in Idaho for a couple of years. And I was raised LDS from a young age. My whole family is LDS. I was pretty active in the church up until, I'd say somewhere in my mid-20s is when I kind of fell away from the church a bit. And at this point, I'm still technically a member because I haven't gone through the process of removing my name from the church records. So technically, I'd be considered an inactive Mormon, but I haven't been to church in 15 years.
Hey, my name is Stacee, and I also live in Utah. I'm 57 years old. I'm married. I have 5 children. I was born and raised in the church, lived in Utah for about a little over 30 years, a little bit more than 30 years. And I am still technically a member of the church too. And I actually have been, I don't know if you want to know like how, when I started this kind of a life thing, but it's been about 15, 16 years that I've been going to clothing optional places. And I have actually been interviewed by we call it a bishop, but interviewed by my bishop and asked about that whole process. And I can go into more detail at that, but I'm still a member of the church. I have some I don't fully believe everything anymore, but I am like Mike, I'm still technically a member. Yes.
So but it sounds like you're technically a member, Stacee, but you are still consider yourself to be a member of LDS as
Yes.
well, whereas
Yes.
Mike doesn't, right?
All I can say is that when you're born and raised in this, it's very hard to leave that mentality. And so, yes, it still runs through my blood, but I have difficulties with certain aspects of it now. So I guess I can just say it that way.
Yeah. And I would say that's accurate, that I'm no longer a member of the church. I no longer consider myself a member of the church.
Okay, good. So let's start with some terminology if we can, because Mormon, LDS, what are the terms, and what's right and what's wrong?
Well, it's interesting because the church just recently came out with a new proclamation, or whatever they call it, where they're trying to get away from the term Mormon. But that's going to be really difficult because everyone's been using the term Mormon forever. So I would say Mormon is still correct. LDS is used as well. LDS stands for Latter-day Saints, because the proper name of the church is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So generally a non-member would say, "Are you Mormon?" But a member would say to another member, "Are you LDS?" I guess it's more common to say LDS than Mormon.
And Stacee, the Church of the Latter-day Saints of Jesus Christ and Latter-day Saints is obviously Christian.
Yes.
How would you describe it? How would you explain it to people who don't really understand or know much about it?
That we believe in Christ and we believe in his teachings. Gosh, you're asking me difficult questions here. You'd think they'd be right off my tongue after I've been Mormon my whole life. We believe in Christ, and we believe in the basic tenets of Christianity. We have a couple differences that we see as different in the Godhead and things like that, but basically we are followers of Christ.
Yeah, we do have some differences from a lot of other Christian religions. Obviously, it's a newer religion, only been around since the mid-1800s or so. There's a lot of rules that the LDS Church has, other churches don't, like no drinking alcohol. There's quite a few different rules. Members of the church are taught that there's certain things that were revealed in the 1800s by Jesus Christ that other religions don't have, and that does tend to give Mormons a sense of, I wouldn't say superiority, but there are some Mormons who do get a little bit of a feeling of, we have stuff no one else has. Although I don't know if every religion has a bit of that. I mean, I would think whatever religion you practice, you're going to think is probably the best one or the right one. But I'd say those are the main differences.
But we do kind of have an us versus them mentality. Totally. Especially
in Utah.
Yeah, really in Utah.
It's interesting when you get into the culture of Mormonism because it's headquartered in Utah, and almost everyone in Utah is either Mormon or was Mormon. So it's very concentrated. There is a bit of a clique.
And we call it a bubble. We live kind of in a bubble here, the Mormon.
Yeah. The Mormon religion outside of Utah is a bit different because in Utah, we're the majority. Outside of Utah, we're the minority.
So how do Mormons view the human body?
I think
go ahead.
Go ahead, Stacee.
They view it as that our bodies are technically, we call it, as I was raised, I was always told my body is a temple. So we revere the body. We want to protect our bodies. We don't, for those reasons, we're taught really that, and I don't want to diss on anybody here, but we were always taught that tattoos are not good, that we should protect our body from, the elements and revere our body, make it a technically a temple, if you will, that it's a sacred thing. And so, but in doing that, sometimes we have a sheltered viewpoint of what the body is, and we almost overprotect it in essence. So, and we're talking about nudism here, and that's one of the aspects of what comes into play because of the way we're taught about our bodies.
Well, I think that the word of wisdom goes along with that. That's one of the unique rules to the Mormon faith is the word of wisdom is you don't drink, you don't smoke, things like that. And it's about keeping your body healthy.
Yeah.
But I don't think there was ever any deliberate, I never heard anything about certainly nudism. I think even as a kid, I heard church leaders joke about, oh, one time I was on vacation and there was a nude beach. It's certainly not something that's, taught. Although one of the unique things, and I think this is going to come into play with the nudism discussion, is the temple garment. Mm-hmm. Once Mormons reach a certain age, generally say 18 or 19, if you go on a mission as a guy, it's 19, women, it's 21. You go through the temple, and there are certain ceremonies when you go through the temple for the first time, but you start wearing temple garments, and you're supposed to wear those day and night. So that kind of makes it, I guess, difficult to keep all the rules as you're supposed to, but also be able to be nude when you want. I mean, you can certainly take off the garments for recreation and showering and swimming in different times, but generally you're taught you're supposed to wear those the majority of the time. So that would make it hard to live a nude life.
So, in a lot of religions, there's the base religion and beliefs, and then there are additional rules that sometimes are cultural. Is the temple garment core to the religion, or is it more like a tradition, in your opinion?
That's a core to the religion. That's not a cultural thing.
So the idea of being nude is against the idea of being a Mormon?
Well, not exactly. I would say being nude 24 hours a day would be, but you can certainly take the garments off for recreation. So I see no reason why, as a faithful member of the church, you couldn't take the garments off to go swimming or something else and then just put them on after you're done. But that would certainly make it difficult to live, say, in a naturist resort where you're nude every day, all day.
Stacee?
I agree that it is core tenet to it, but I also agree that some members do take it to the extreme. I mean, in anything, there's always those who have to succeed, everyone else. So what we are taught is to wear them throughout our life, but the culture and the church comes back and says, we have told you to wear them 24/7, but that's really not what we have committed to. What we committed to was to counsel to wear them throughout our life. So that can be, it's however you want to determine what throughout your life means, as far as I'm concerned. That's how I manage the nudism part. I'm like, you know what? It's whatever I think throughout my life is. So
for you, Stacee, you can be a Mormon and be a naturist or nudist at the same time.
Yes, I can. I mean, I've come to that okay place in my mind, and that's what I had to go through when I chose to do this. That was a real struggle for me, and I had to come to an agreement with myself of what I deemed was acceptable to me. And if I want to take it a step further, what was acceptable to me and what was acceptable to my God.
Have you had this discussion at all with the church itself or leaders in the church?
No. Well, I did at one point. This is many years ago when I first. Yeah, my story's a little deeper, but many years ago, I was actually called in, if you will, called into my bishop, and he asked me about this, and he only knew of it because I had mentioned it to a girl in passing of how much it had changed my life to have these experiences. And so she had, trickle down effect. She had known, her husband knew the bishop really well and mentioned in passing that I had mentioned about a nude beach, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, I get called into the bishop, and he asked me about this experience and these experiences that I had and what I felt like it. And I basically told him that I didn't feel like I was doing anything that went against what I believe as a Latter-day Saint. I didn't believe it. I had broken any rules, any covenants that I may have made, or any agreements that I had made, even with God, that I had broken anything. And so I had come to the agreement that it was okay for me. And all I was told was in from that point was that I should not tell everyone, that I should keep it more to myself. And that's the counsel that I got.
Mike, you're no longer considering yourself a Mormon, but do you think you could be a naturist or a nudist and a Mormon at the same time?
I do. And going back to what I said earlier, I didn't mean to imply too much that it's set in stone how much you're supposed to wear the garments. There's a lot of the rules in the LDS church are kind of open to interpretation. Like Stacee was saying, you kind of get to a place where it's kind of between you and the Lord is the way they phrase it a lot of times. So there are some people who certainly wear their garments more than others. I remember in college, there would be some students who would come to recreation classes, like we played racquetball, and some of them would have their garments on under their t-shirts and shorts because they chose to keep them on. So it is certainly different person to person, but I think there's no reason you can't be a naturist and a member of the LDS church. I just think the garment would make it more complicated because I don't know how, if you could be nude all the time, although I guess most naturists aren't nude all the time anyway, unless you live year round in a naturist community.
So you didn't fall out of the church, if that's, I don't know if that's the right term, but you didn't stop being a Mormon or an LDS member because of naturism.
No, I didn't. Leave the church is the term we would use. And that happened just for, normal reasons. Just as you grow and get older, I decided it wasn't for me. There was a few years where I was a naturist and Mormon. And I do remember at first I was kind of trying to decide, is this okay or not? And I think for me, it was mostly just the cultural attitudes. Like a lot of people, when they hear about naturism, they assume nudity equals sex. And it's hard to separate the two just from the media culture we grow up in. But I did come to a point where I felt I wasn't doing anything wrong the more I understood what naturism was about. And it really didn't conflict with being a Mormon. I think there was a good 3 or 4 years where I was a practicing Mormon and a practicing naturist.
Do you think that it's more difficult for a practicing Mormon to try naturism than other Christians, obviously, than not, as opposed to people who don't have a religion that's in any way restrictive?
That's hard to say. I feel like, so there's a lot of other things that Mormons do, and there's some debate about whether some things are okay or not. Like generally Mormons don't drink alcohol, but some think you can't drink caffeine either. Some think that's perfectly okay. Some Mormons won't watch R-rated movies, some will. So I could see some of the more, I guess, strict practicing Mormons saying it's wrong and having a harder time practicing naturism, but I don't know, because I think in any religion, more because of the American culture with the media, the more religious you are, I would think the harder it would be to embrace naturism.
Well, Stacee, honestly, the advice you got from the church leader is not one that I think you would get in a lot of religions that are fairly strict about exposure of the body or whatever, or have strong taboos against it. So do you think yours is unusual, or do you think that's actually fairly typical of how the church, your church, looks at things?
Oh, no. I think mine was unusual. I mean, I think, and back to your question before, do you think it's harder to be Mormon and be a nudist? I do think it's harder. And the reason that I think it's harder is because we put such a, we have to conform so much to what the culture has here that I think that most Mormons would be afraid to be found out. And so they won't do it because of that fear, not because they don't think it's right or wrong. It's just because of the fear of being found out. As far as what I was counseled and told, I think he just said that because he didn't know what else to say, because there really is no doctrine in our religion that says you cannot be a nudist. I mean, there's nothing in any of our scripture or anything that mentions that. So, I think he just didn't know what else to tell me, basically. And I kind of took his counsel in essence. In our church, we have a lot of fear-based regulations, if you will. Everyone does what they do out of fear of being excommunicated or kicked out of the church or shunned by their family. And so I kind of took his counsel. I just kind of checked where I told people about it. That was a long time ago, and I started doing this in 2001, and I don't even remember what year at that time, but it was probably 2004 or something like that when I got called in. Here we are, many years later, and now my thought process has changed to I don't really care what people think about me, because I figure I have come to a place in my life when I can make my own choices, and I'm not going to be regulated by what someone else thinks about me. And so I am very open about it now, and I'm not afraid to tell anybody that I do this, because in essence I'm proud of what I do, because I feel like this has been a blessing to me in my life, and what I feel about my body and who I am, and it has freed me from some of the shame that we get in the world about our bodies. And so I want to share that with people. I wish they would experience it, because it's such a great thing.
So why don't we just go there, actually? So you've always had a very transformative experience. How did it happen, and how did you kind of navigate that journey?
It's been a long time coming. What brought me? I have to thank my husband for this, because my husband, and as I've met people who are at the beach or wherever we go, in places that we venture to visit, I've met a lot of husbands who this was their first thing, and they tried to get their wives to come. But anyway, so I kind of was the same way. My husband had, and this is kind of a weird way he came to it, but he had struggled with pornography his whole life. And he kind of fell upon a place that we used to have a group, and it's still available, but we don't frequent it anymore. But it was called the LDS Skinny Dippers, and it was a forum. And he found this forum online and had started, interacting with people on the forum and reading their stories, and how Naturism had changed their viewpoints, and how it had freed them of some of the struggles with pornography, mostly because of the curiosity was gone. And so he asked me one day what I thought about it. And when you're Mormon, like, porn's a dirty word. And so I was like appalled that he would even think of seeing naked bodies, and that wouldn't be considered porn. And so we struggled with that for a little while, and then we decided to go on a trip together. And we've always vacationed quite regularly. So we decided to go to Hawaii. We went to Maui, and of course the famous Little Beach is there. And he asked me before we went, would you go to the beach? And I said, sure, I'll go, but I'm not going to do this, because in my mind, it was still a dirty thing, to go to this beach. And I just figured he wanted to go see the naked girls. So we went to the beach, and this was, I'm thinking it was in 1990. It was 2001. Anyways, I can't remember the exact date, but it was 2001. And we went to this beach, and, I kind of had an experience on that beach that it was a life-changing experience. And what it was is I sat down on the beach, and I, of course, was not going to participate because this was awful. And my husband went out to snorkel and stuff, and I sat there, and I told him the most I'd ever do is take my top off, and because that seemed like I could do it. But I was not going to take my bottoms off, because that was too sexual in nature. That's what in my mind thought what it was. So I sat there while he was out snorkeling, and I looked around me, and I saw all the people there on the beach, and I watched a lady come to the beach with her 2 children, and she, and I'm not skinny by any means. I've struggled with my weight my whole life, so my body image has been a problem for me, and I've always felt less than because of my body. But she came to that beach, and she was not skinny at all, and she, I don't know how many yardage she was away from me, but close enough that I could watch her. And she pounced onto that beach with her 2 little kids, and she stood up there and stripped down with nothing, took all of her clothes off and took her little kids' clothes off, and they ran to the shore and jumped in that shore. And I sat there. Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional because I didn't realize how much it meant to me. But I sat there watching her, and I thought to myself, Stacee, what is your problem? I mean, she can go and she doesn't care what anybody thinks about her. What is your problem? Because here I was kind of like covering up with a towel and just embarrassed and, like thinking everybody's looking at me. And so that moment, I took my top off because I thought I got to feel what I got to have an experience there. And so I took my top off, but I never did take my bottoms off that trip. But that moment, I went home after that trip, and we only spent one day at that beach that time, but it changed the way I viewed body acceptance, because I was like, I didn't care. I was just so happy for her to be excited to jump in that pool or in the ocean with her children. And so I thought a lot about that. And I came back and, I struggled. I told you before that I had to come to terms that this was okay, that I hadn't done something, some awful sin that was going to keep me from God for the rest of my life. And so I came to that it was okay. It took me a couple months, and I finally came to the point where I said, you know what, it happened, and it wasn't bad, and I'm not going to die. And so I might try this again. And so we continued to try to find places to go. And I think our next experience was to go to Orient Beach in St. Martin. And that has become my place, my happy place, because there I found true acceptance in who I was, and that everyone accepts everyone. And there was so much goodness there. And so that's and it's taken me years. We came home. We've been open from the get-go with our children. We have 5 children. They all know that we participate in this. It's been a good thing in our home because I wanted them to know. That's one of the reasons why I agreed to it, is because I wanted my kids to know what a real woman looks like, not what the company or the world wants the people, these young boys to think. I have boys mostly. I have 1 girl too, but 4 boys. And I wanted them to grow up knowing what a real woman looks like, not what, the pornography puts out there for them. That's not real, because my goal was to raise happy families. And so when my boys get married, I wanted them to look at their wives and go, you know what, she's beautiful no matter what. And she doesn't have to look like a Playboy bunny or bunny, whatever, to be okay. And so that was why we really started this. And it's been a great experience. I don't know if I rambled a little long. Sorry.
No, that's a wonderful story. That's what I mean, and not to take anything away from it, but it's not an unusual story. It's a story that why this movement is so powerful, and when people find it are so bitten by it. Mike, what about your story?
Well, yeah, I discovered naturism in my early 20s. It was I actually stumbled across a video cassette back when video stores were a thing. It was a video called A Beginner's Guide to Skinny Dipping. And it turns out it was a promotional video that the Naturist Society had produced. I didn't know what it was, but it intrigued me. So I checked it out, and it was basically a video that showed what the naturist lifestyle is all about and profiled a number of resorts. And I said, this is kind of amazing. Like, I'd always heard the term nude beaches and nudist colonies or nudist camps, but it seemed like such an abstract idea, not something I would ever experience. But after watching this video, I was really intrigued, and I did a little research. There was a group in Utah at the time called Utah Naturists, but they didn't allow single men to join. So I kept looking, and I decided to take a trip to California, and I went to Lupin Lodge. Was actually my first resort. I visited it and was incredibly nervous driving up there. Thought, I can't believe I'm doing this. Went by myself, but once I got there and stripped down, as soon as I was nude, I was comfortable. I think it's like jumping off a diving board. It's the lead up to it that makes you so nervous. But once you do it, you realize, oh, this is fine. And, as soon as I was nude around other people, everyone was accepting and friendly. And I said, this is it. I can't believe it took me this long to find this. And ever since then, I've been consider myself a naturist. And I think it's a healthy, great lifestyle. And I've struggled with my weight off and on throughout my life. So that was a thing too, to be able to accept myself was a really big thing. In fact, it's funny, even to this day, I think I'm more comfortable nude around my naturist friends than I am generally clothed in other situations. It's just amazing what that environment of acceptance does for you.
You know, it's interesting. You both tell stories about, accepting and being comfortable with yourself and that kind of thing, which of course is what naturism is about. Um, and you tell me that LDS is about respecting the body. So that actually doesn't seem to be a conflict.
Except that we have such a strong rhetoric that we teach about modesty. And for some reason, nudism, in our church, nudism equals sex, like Mike was talking about earlier. And so we just can't, we just don't want to see we want our bodies covered up. And that's the whole message that we send in the church. And that is one of the things that has brought me out of it, because I don't agree with that messaging. And I think it causes more problems than it helps, because we do have women who won't even, change into a bathing suit in front of their own husbands because of their inability to see nudity. They don't want them to be seen. And that's not a healthy mentality.
The word modesty is always an interesting one. Part of it is, I don't know if you know, but my first language is French. And in French, you don't, there is no such, you don't use modesty to talk about not being nude. Because to me, and modesty is about, well, we know what the definition of modesty is, but the fact it's used for wearing clothes is interesting, because clothes are rarely modest.
Right.
Clothes are ways to hide your true self. And pretend to be something different than you are. Clothes are supposed to be slimming or make you seem more important or powerful or taller or shorter or whatever. So, do you think that makes sense, the word modesty here?
Yeah, no, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't at all, because modesty is more of an attitude than it is a clothing article that we wear. And being nude, and that's what's been so intriguing to me, to be nude. I can be modest being nude more than I can being with clothes on. And but it's hard for them to fathom. In our church, it's just not part of their mentality. They just don't think about that.
Yeah, and it is an interesting conversation. I always wonder about other places of the world, like in Europe, because missionaries go all over the world, and I'll hear stories from people who served their missions in Europe, and they'll just mention about how much more, I don't know, nudity there is over there. I've heard all kinds of stories of people answering the door nude, or just they'll be talking to people and someone will walk in nude without thinking anything about it. And I wonder, because so much of it is cultural for us, I wonder what the attitude is like with more members of the church in other countries. In Finland, Finnish saunas are a really big thing. And I wonder about that, and if that's something that I don't know myself. It's something I would be interested in talking to people in other countries and finding that out, though, is what is their perspective on that?
Yeah, it is an interesting thing, and something I've been blessed that I've had a chance to travel the world, and it really makes you realize that a lot of our attitudes are cultural. Although with the internet now, we're getting more of a homogeneity, I think that's the word, in how these cultural icons and ideas in terms of toplessness in Europe is not as common as it was, because the theory is because the mainstream media no longer allows it. Facebook doesn't allow it. Doesn't matter which country you're in. That's all very ethnocentric that way. You're both right now, thousands of people are going to listen to you talk. Are you generally very open and public about the fact you're naturist?
I don't run around naked in my neighborhood, no, because
No, but telling people, talking about it.
I am. That's why I said I've come to the point now where I tell them, because it's been such a life-changing thing for me. And I am not afraid to say, we just came back from a trip to St. Martin, and if people ask me, I don't care. I'll tell them where we went.
And Mike?
Generally, with a lot of my friends and some of my family, people know There are people I keep it from, just professionally, and so I'm not everybody, but I guess I'm mostly out there for the most part.
And have either of you lost any friends or relatives or anything? I don't mean lost like dying, but I mean in terms of stop talking to you because of that?
No, never had
No,
any.
I haven't either.
Yeah, never had a problem with that.
The impression I have is that LDS is one that kind of shuns you if you're not following the rules. Is that wrong?
No, that I think that you probably have that right. They wouldn't want to say they shun you, but they're taught to avoid those things that might create doubt in their minds about what they believe, and so they will remove themselves. They just don't hang out with those people anymore that might be thinking differently than they do. Nudism. It's been interesting to me though, because nudism to me, or naturism, whatever you want to call it, my friends, those close to me, my friends, most all of my friends know that I go to the beach, and we generally go to the beach or to some resorts that are close, because in Utah we don't have a beach, so we have to travel. But they generally know that we go to a beach or we visit, and that I go, that we always say that it's clothing optional. We go to a clothing optional place, and most generally it's quite refreshing to hear them say, "Gosh, I wish I could do that. I wish I could do that." And then I'll say to them, "Why don't you?" Because it has been life-changing for me. And that's usually the way that I will approach it. And I don't feel that I get shunned because of that, because I'm not threatening them with it. So.
Well, it's interesting that neither of you have lost friends or relatives. So obviously the whole idea of nudity, naturism, nudism, is not that threatening to people in their religion.
No, and I suppose I would add that that's probably informed who I tell. I'm probably less open with people who I feel like they're more stronger in the LDS faith. I may not mention it to them, certain people in my family or certain friends and work people, but so it probably leans more towards the non-members of the church that I associate with that know. And I hadn't really occurred to me until we were talking about it, but that there probably is something to that.
And I was open from the beginning with my own children and with my parents. Now I do have a sister-in-law that really doesn't associate with us anymore because of our choices to go to those beaches. She doesn't agree with it, but I mean, we're not dead to her or anything like that, but we just don't hang out with them much anymore. But on my side of the family, and I'm from a very large family. There's 12 children that I'm the oldest of 12. So all of my family, they all know that we go there, and even my parents, and nobody said anything about it. It's just what we do. And in fact, I had a sister that she was on a cruise and went to St. Martin, and she told me just a little while ago that she said, "Just so you know, I crossed off something on my bucket list." And I said, "What?" And she said, "I went to your beach." And I was like, "You did?" I mean, I was just thrilled. And so she did it too, because I think she was fascinated about it. So I haven't been really shunned by anybody. I'm like Mike, though. I am a little careful when it comes to my work, because Mormons stick with Mormons. And so if you have someone who, that they do something, they won't patronize you in your business kind of thing. So you have to be careful about that.
Do you think that this comfort, strong word, or lack of the fact that it's not as threatening is because our society is changing? Do you think it would have been the same reaction 40, 50 years ago?
Yeah,
I think that's definitely helping.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would have been different 40, 50 years ago.
The church is changing?
Well, I think more the culture. Yeah, the people in general.
And is the church changing as well?
I don't think our church has really ever had a statement about it. That's why I said I could never find any statements in there where it was good or bad. It's just never been really addressed. And maybe there's just not been enough people doing it to get them to address it. I don't know.
Yeah, the church has changed a little bit in some aspects. It's become, I think, a little more accepting of the homosexual lifestyle, although it seems like every time they take a step forward, there's a step back in something they say. But it seems like they've changed a little bit, become a little more accepting in that.
And the church is you suggested the church is very much against pornography, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And why is it against pornography? How does that go against the church teachings?
I think it's partly because sex outside of marriage is one of the big sins in the church teachings, and the idea that that would encourage that, or even that's just something they preach about all the time, is pornographic images are not good to dwell on. You shouldn't look at it.
Yeah, they think that it leads to infidelity, basically, and even maybe not necessarily physical infidelity, but emotional infidelity. And so they really push people to stay away from that.
So without getting into whether that's right or wrong, it's interesting because I can see the conflict. If you really understand, as your husband saw Stacee,
Mm-hmm.
it's actually almost like an antidote to pornography in some ways. It's the opposite. Naturism is about accepting nudity without the sex and maybe
Right.
satisfying the curiosity or the desire sometimes. I think we have a natural desire to just throw off our clothes because it feels so good.
Yeah.
So if they understand that, the church should be all for it. But on the other hand, they may not understand, like most of the world, and think, well, nudity, therefore pornography. It's the same thing, right?
Yeah. Most definitely, and that's one of the reasons why I just thought that he was wanting to do the nudity thing because that was just another rationalization to see naked women. But it's been all of this years I've realized that just what you said, that when we put our clothes on, our clothes accent the parts that people are curious about, and so that's what leads our mind to wander. When I'm at the beach, standing around a group of people having a great time, I am not sitting there, salivating over my neighbor kind of thing. I'm not doing that because, first of all, there's no curiosity in it. And second of all, because it's not sexual. It is not a sexual thing.
No, but okay, you never look at somebody and find them attractive?
Oh, I might look at them and, yeah, but it's not like I'm saying I'm going to go sleep with him. Do you know what I mean?
No.
You could find them attractive with their clothes on too.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. No, and I just say that because sometimes we all, as naturists, we all sound like asexual creatures, and I think that's disingenuous as well. But it's probably less so than when they're wearing clothes and suggestive clothing at that, right?
Oh yeah, there's many times like when my husband and I will sit on the beach and both of us will appreciate a beautiful body as it walks by. I mean, and we're not ashamed to say to each other, "Wow, that person has a really nice, beautiful body. That's awesome."
Yeah,
I mean, I think it's an appreciation, not where I'm, hot for something. You know what I'm saying?
You're not lusting after them. You're just going, "Whoa, look at that." Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Because
So,
I do think there is a natural desire that we do like to look at each other, which is what drives part of the initial pornography things or whatever. When anything you hide, when you hide it, people want to go look. That's the problem.
we look at each other even in clothes. I mean, that's why we have models, and that's why we have runways with these beautiful models that walk down the street. Our fascination is just to see other people. And I don't think necessarily they have to be dressed. I mean, it's just, whatever. We just like looking at other people. I think mostly to compare ourselves to them.
Well, religions approach the chastity or being faithful to your spouse in different ways, but one of them that's common is to avoid temptation. But see, I don't think there's any valor in that. I think the valor is to, when you're exposed to temptation, not giving into it. That's strength of character, and that's real beliefs in your values if that's what you believe in. When you avoid it completely, then if it suddenly shows up, you don't have the tools to deal with it.
Right.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And so I think religions would do better to promote people to go to all these nude beaches and see what there is and just be comfortable with who they are as well.
Right, to embrace it.
Exactly. So what's the future for nudism and naturism in Utah?
Well, we're working on that. We have a club and we have pretty good attendance. We've got a nude swim we do every month, and our community keeps growing. We have a club called Wasatch Naturists, and every now and then we'll have people find us and write to us and say, either they've been looking for us for a long time or they just barely found naturism and are excited to find there's people in Utah who practice it and they want to join. And our community just keeps growing, and I think it's going to get better. Hopefully one day we can open a landed resort in this state.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
You're getting as many people who have left the church as are still within the church?
Yeah, it goes back and forth. I had a couple of weeks there where I think I had 5 or 6 contact me, and they were all active members of the church. And then I have several people who are not. And we do have the LDS Skinny Dipper Forum. I think Stacee mentioned that before. It was something that went away for a while, but it's back again. It's LDSSDF.org is the website. And it is an active website now. And there's a lot of Mormon naturists on there discussing naturism and how to reconcile it with the faith. And that forum keeps growing as well. I think we've had people join us through that website.
So there's a forum. Is there a resource? Let's say there's an LDS member listening right now. They're going, yeah, sounds good, but I don't know how to explain this to anybody else. Is there a resource on your website?
I think LDSSDF.org, the LDS Skinny Dippers Forum, is the best resource. And our website, Wasatch Naturists, we also link to that as well. So I think it's on the frequently asked questions of our website. People say it's specific to Utah. It says, do Mormons practice nudism? And is this against the teachings of the church? And we put links to the forums. They can go and research it themselves.
So in a word, is it against the teaching of the church?
No.
I would say no.
I'd say no. I think it's just perceptions, just cultural perceptions.
So that's all for this episode of the Naturist Living Show. Thank you, as always, for listening. You'll find links to all of the items I mentioned in the show notes on our website at naturistlivingshow.com. Keep sending your comments and suggestions. I really appreciate getting them. The show's email address is contact@naturistlivingshow.com. And if you want, you can call and leave a comment. We get, as you can tell, we don't put many on because we don't get many voice comments. I get people sending me all kinds of lovely comments telling us what a great job we're doing, which I really appreciate. But because they're written, I ask them to call in and read it, and I guess they're too shy and they don't. So if you want to call in, it's not hard. You could dial you could dial the phone number for Bear Oaks, which is country code 901-473-6060, or toll free if you're in U.S. and Canada, which is 1-888-373-9124. You can also Skype us, which is Bear Oaks is our Skype name, and then all 3 options get you in the main phone system, and then we're at extension 333. I hope you enjoyed this show and that you'll join us again for the next episode of the Naturist Living Show.
This episode of the Naturist Living Show was brought to you by Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park. Traditional naturist values in a modern setting. Traditional values means that naturism is more than just taking your clothes off. It is a life philosophy with physical, psychological, environmental, social, and moral benefits. Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park strives to promote those naturist values in a modern setting that provides the amenities and services that our members and visitors expect. Free your body, free your mind. Learn more at www.bearoaks.ca.